But at this time, let's officially get started with our webinar. This is brought to you by Cleanfax, Masters in Restoration Pricing and Documentation. As you can see, we have expert panelists. We'll introduce them in a moment. But we want to help everyone attending this webinar to get some tips, some strategy to turbocharge their restoration projects. And everyone has challenges. We all need help. And from our panelists or from you as attendees, be sure to put in the chat anything you have to share as well. Questions or tips you might share with the audience. We encourage all of that. So I'm your moderator. My name is Jeff Cross. I'm the ISSA Media Director. I've been running Cleanfax magazine for a long time now. I've met many of you. I recognize a lot of the names on our webinar today. And I really enjoy working with Ben, Nathan, and Anthony. We cross paths at trade shows and other events. But with us today, as far as running the webinar, we have Martha Schmidt. She's our ISSA virtual events producer. You might wonder about that picture. She lives in a digital world, so it's a perfect picture of Martha right there. So we also have Elizabeth Christensen. She's new with Cleanfax. She's our new editor. So she'll be joining us towards the end of the webinar to ask some of the questions we're going to receive from you, live questions. So be sure to put those in the chat or the Q&A, and she'll be looking for those. We want to stump the panelists. Ben, Nathan, and Anthony, we want to stump them. That's the goal.
Bring it on.
Bring it on.
Yeah, that won't be hard to do.
It's going to be a fun one. So as we move on through our webinar, we want to just mention a couple of points here. I already talked about this, but a few just joined. So use the Q&A to ask official questions. The chat feature is fine. Sometimes they get buried, so feel free to repeat a question if you want there. But Elizabeth will be watching that and making sure we get your questions answered. Any questions you ask that we can't get to, we'll try to follow up later offline and answer those questions. All three of our panelists are here to help all those in the industry. You will receive a copy of this recording. So that if you registered and you're here right now, you'll receive a copy. So that will come in an email in a few days. I can't tell you exactly when, but it's going to be out in a few days. It'll also be on cleanfax.com. You're muted, so make noise and just enjoy the webinar as we go through this. Want to mention one other point, and that's about ISSA, which is the parent company of Cleanfax and our other media brands. If you're not a member of ISSA, look us up, go to ISSA.com or send an email to membership@ISSA.com. Happy to answer any questions about our association that's globally representing cleaning and restoration. So our panelists today, as you can see, they're live pictures and the little squares off to the side. But we have Ben Looper. He's the founder and CEO of Southeast Restoration. He's also our RIA president this year. Nate Cisney is the partner, Restoration Made Simple, and Anthony Nelson, a partner with Pivot My Biz. They've all spent their careers in this industry. I would say they've made a few mistakes along the way, like most have made, and have figured things out. And we want to always learn from other people's mistakes, don't we? That's the goal. Love it if you consider this as we go through our webinar. What would you like to learn? You can put something in now or anytime during our webinar. If you think of something, I want to know about this, or can you dig into that? Put it into the chat feature there. It could be a suggestion or a question, but we'll keep an eye on that as well. All right, you guys ready? Let's get started. What I'd like to do is have each of you, Ben, Nate, and Anthony, have an opening statement about what you see with the industry. Obviously, the question's right there. And as you do share your thoughts, introduce yourself, what you do for the industry, spend a little bit of time setting yourself up as the expert we know you are. And Ben Looper, you're first. Start us off.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate you doing this today. Looks like we got a great group on. I'm honored to be on here with Nathan and Anthony. Not sure that I'm qualified to do this with these two guys, but I'm grateful to be here. What are some of the current industry challenges and debates surrounding pricing and documentation? So a couple of things that stick out to me right now is the understanding that we have or don't have with the pricing consistencies, between the carriers and the TPAs, and how exact wear core is looked at as an end-all be-all as opposed to a guide. So I just we'll dig into that a little bit more. I'd encourage everybody to learn a little bit more about that. The other is the integration of technology in today's systems. We have all kind of new artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics that are really changing the way we do business. I've been in the business almost 30 years, and what we do today looks a whole lot different from the yellow pad and the fax machines and those things that it was when I started. So the tools that we have at our disposal and how those are integrating into all the systems, and I think hopefully we'll be able to eliminate some of the subjectivity that we're dealing with between the parties of TPAs, carriers, contractors, and make those lines a lot clearer, a lot more black and white than we have these days. So couple of challenges that we're working through ourselves, and I know many others are working through as I have those discussions with others throughout the country through the RIA there.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, I know with RIA, you're the new president, and a great event you just had recently. I was there, and all you do, we appreciate that. But what challenges? They're everywhere, aren't they? And I know those attending this webinar want to find solutions. Well, Nate, let's go to you next. What do you have to share about this topic?
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on. Really appreciate it, Jeff. Love what the ISSA does and all you guys support. So thank you. My name's Nate Sisney. We own a coaching / consulting company, much like Anthony. Our focus is primarily small to medium-sized businesses. So people that are just struggling to figure out how to make all this work in this ever-evolving industry. So I think to answer your question, I think there's a number of things. Ben did an awesome job of bringing up some of the big ones. I think a couple that I see, because we do, our company does write estimates for our clients. And so I get to see firsthand what's going on. And I think one that I see is just with every good, there's bad. So when I say this, I understand there's some good, but there seems to be some polar opposition of the more insurance wants to push, the further the restoration contractor wants to go the other direction. And because of that, it creates enemies, creates hatred pretty quickly. And I'm more of a person of try to find middle ground, but it seems like I'm seeing more of that polar opposition, whatever that right word is, of a lot of division that occurs. Now, I think there's a lot of unity that's coming together as well. And I'm grateful that we have the RIA on our side to help out with stuff like that. So that would be one thing. And then I think to Ben's point, technology, right? There's just so much good technology. And sometimes to the point that maybe it's too much for some of our guys or technicians, right? I've written a few articles about that. Some people agreed, some people didn't, but there's some awesome technology. And I think if we can find a way to bring it more so it's cohesive, I think would be a huge help for a lot of us, so that the guys don't get bogged down with it. But those are some of the things that I've seen, along with the many others, but I'm sure we'll discuss those on the call.
We sure will. Appreciate that. And Anthony, introduce yourself. Tell us what you think and where we can buy a shirt like that.
Well, this is my local Macy's. So
Oh,
your local Macy's.
well, that's a downer. All right.
Yeah. So Anthony Nelson, career-long restorer, started in the trenches as a technician 25 years ago and kind of sat in most seats through that career. I didn't do payroll. That's the one thing I've never done. And you don't want me doing payroll. I would be horrible at it. What do I see as challenges? My gosh. Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say that there was a lack of alignment around pricing between the common pricing databases, the insurance carriers, and the restorer. Anybody who's seen anything from me will understand that I've always been a staunch advocate of customizing your pricing, making sure that there's content and articles out there for those that wish to do that. I think that that's an excellent opportunity. If the prices in Xactimate or Symbility / CoreLogic are not accurate in your marketplace, kind of throwing the ball down the field a little bit. One of the challenges I see for restorers as we move into a world where there is increasing AI and technology in the field with our technicians is our ability to capture data in the field. I think that with, you know, AI estimating and invoicing kind of on the horizon for us as an industry, if you're not focused in making sure that you have good digital field data capture, this is where you'll get left behind, unfortunately. And so, you know, kind of my nod is all restorers, if you're not doing something as far as digital field documentation, please start now. We want you to come with us. We don't want you to be left behind.
Good advice. Appreciate all those thoughts. So let's talk about this topic, changes over time. Now, you've all been doing this a while. So what have you seen, good or bad, throughout the years that can impact today to help us discover solutions? And Nate, we'll start with you on this.
Wow. I mean, there's been a lot of really good, right? I mean, as Anthony and Ben both said, the technology is just getting better and better. And I agree 100%. Either jump on the bandwagon or get left behind, right? It's just moving. I think COVID definitely accelerated the use of technology and the fact that maybe adjusters don't need to show up to jobs like they used to. So I think it definitely accelerated everything in that regard. So with that regard, I'm grateful for the technology that we do have. As far as the bad goes, to me, it seems like, and this is not a knock on a specific carrier / company, but you know, TPAs are getting bigger and bigger. We're seeing more and more pop up all the time. And with the TPAs, to me, it feels like they're squeezing more and more, and they're expecting more, they're demanding more. And with that, you know, I think the question is, at what point, when can you stop squeezing and how much can you stop demanding from the contractor? And it's getting harder. Now, I think technology has helped, but at the same time, I think the question comes down to what's reasonable and what's not reasonable. And I think many of us on the call, if they're owners of restoration companies, have felt that squeeze, and it seems like it's just getting tighter and tighter for everybody. So I think the good is awesome technology. The bad is it seems like our requirements and our SLAs and our KPIs keep getting stricter and stricter to the point that it makes us hard to do our job. What we all signed up to go do, suck water and pull pad and carpet, right? Seems like half of our day is spent doing other stuff that's not related to the actual, I guess, hammer and nail type work.
Yeah, good thoughts. And Anthony, follow up with that.
There's this parenting advice influencer that I follow on Instagram. I don't follow a whole lot of people on Instagram. If Ben Looper had one, I'd follow him. But she said something that resonated in the back of my mind, and I think it applies to all of us as restorers. Boundaries are what you allow to happen to you. And, you know, kind of piggybacking off of Nate's comment, right? I think what a lot of restorers are wrestling with are that boundary of whether or not they're choosing to participate in programs, and then outside of the TPA envelope, what they will and will not tolerate coming from adjusters and carriers directly. Now, I try and hold a very pragmatic view on relationships with adjusters, because at the end of the day, they're people. They're people just like you and I, right? And if we treat them like people, then they'll probably behave like people. But if we treat them like robots, then they're probably going to behave like robots back to us. And so whenever anybody's in a semi-contentious relationship or dialogue with an adjuster, I'm always very quick to say, hey, look, stop. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Pick up the phone call. Make a meaningful connection with an individual. Because if you're working on a basis of, hey, we're all human, then the conversation gets more realistic at that moment. Whereas if you're like, well, the SLAs say this, or I don't pay O&P, or okay, fine. Those are company guidelines that were written by somebody that doesn't do this every day. Let's get down to brass tacks and how this work happens in the field every day. The one thing I will say on the good side is I remember being a technician in the truck, and we had these county-based map books where you had to go to you'd look up the address in the street in a specific county, and you'd have to go to A5, and you'd literally spend 5 minutes figuring out where the hell you're going to go before you left the parking lot. And just to be able to one click in an application and get turn-by-turn directions, just as a kind of a great example of how far technology has come to actually help us do our jobs in the field. We spend a lot of time complaining about how cumbersome the technology is and what it doesn't do. And I feel like we don't spend enough time focusing on what that technology has enabled us to do. You think about the advent of centralized estimating with geospatial technologies, like that wouldn't be possible at the level that we're executing it on as an industry now without those technologies. So it is a good and the bad, right? It's a dichotomy of two different ends. And I think we need to focus on the good just as much as we focus on the bad.
Mm-hmm. Good thoughts. Take away someone's technology and they quickly will tell you how bad life is. All right, Ben, wrap up this topic for us. What do you think?
Well, it's always hard to go last, and you're going to hear a lot of the same. You're going to hear a lot of the same stuff today because we're all dealing with the same challenges. But I think the bad for me is the removal of the human element. I'm a people's person. I'm a culture guy, and you know, there are positions being eliminated by some of these technologies, but there's also positions being created by some of these technologies. They're just different positions. So, you know, we have them in our organization, guys that have been doing, you know, writing estimates and doing the same thing for 15, 20 plus years, you know, with how they've written estimates, what they do. And it's hard to change. But we're in a world that's changing daily. It's not even yearly anymore, but it's changing daily with the technology that we have. And, you know, Anthony mentioned the map book, and I too had the Rand McNally map book with the roll of quarters before cell phones. When you would get a page from a adjuster to meet them somewhere, and you had to go pull over and find a payphone to call them and figure out where to meet them at. So I think that's, you know, the bad is of how, and, you know, the elimination of some of the, you know, the current roles, but, you know, the excitement of, you know, potentially of what those that are willing to make the changes. And we say this in our organization all the time, what got us where we are today won't get us where we want to get to tomorrow. So, you know, you have to be willing to change with the times and change with the industry. And those that don't are going to get left behind because, you know, we literally have these computers in our hand that can do anything we want. And, you know, we used to have a phone, and then we could do some stuff on the phone and some stuff, and then have to go back to the computer. We can literally do almost everything we need to do now from this little device in our hand, which is a phone and a computer and everything else. So the good news, you know, the good that I see is that people there's more willingness to listen. So the pricing companies, the Symbility and Verisk and Exactware, they're you know, are willing to have the conversations and make the changes. We are seeing this, and we mentioned this at the RIA, you know, conference, but they, you know, if we will provide them as contractors correct information and give them the resources to go get that information from, they will make the changes. They're not trying to hold, you know, steady to something that's not true. And so all of the conflicts of, you know, the pricing models being a set standard and we're not deviating from that, I'm seeing some positive movement in that, but we're going to need the contractors to come alongside and help us communicate some of those challenges because, you know, unfortunately, I've seen people and other contractors and organizations go out of business because they were willing to do it. They were willing to do the work for prices that they couldn't get the work done for. And it was only because they weren't providing the information to some of these pricing models that, you know, could have made those changes. So as long we're finally getting TPAs and carriers and all the pricing companies to the table to have these conversations, and it feels like everybody's willing to listen and be reasonable about it. So I think that's the good and the bad is we've kind of turned the tide a little bit, and we're in the first stages of getting the right people to the table to have the conversations that we need to help the industry move forward.
I appreciate you covering that, Ben, because I've as an observer, I've seen the talk and the push to do all that over the years, and it is coming together, and I see that, such as you mentioned at RIA show. So what a great thing to see it all coming together, and maybe good news moving forward on the part, as you mentioned, the pricing models and the technology that's backing that up. But let's move on and talk about pricing.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah, go ahead.
One thing, I'd feel horrible if I didn't say this as Anthony and Ben were talking, but if we talk about a good, the equipment is all much lighter and smaller. You can
Dude.
actually carry 4 fans in one hand if you get those little Phoenixes. Your DHUs are now a box, right? The equipment is definitely a lot better for those that are technicians out there doing work.
Yeah, I got a L17 vertebrae that'll never be the same thanks to a dry yeast 2400D hue down a flight of stairs.
So all you restorers out there that used to carry all that heavy equipment probably remember when payphones were a dime as well. Ben mentioned a quarter, yeah. But all right, good points. Very good. Justifying pricing. Now we talked about the pricing software, but this is about dealing with insurance companies. So I think it's Anthony's turn to start us off on a topic. So what do you think? What are some things that those watching, those here today, can do, low-hanging fruit, to just make it easier working with insurance companies?
So if you're saying, look, I want to grab some low-hanging fruit, regardless if it's Symbility or Xactimate, the methodology used to assemble those per square foot line items is the same. You have a labor component, material component, and sometimes an equipment component. Within each of those line items, they have individual component prices. And so I would encourage you, particularly even in a TPA environment, I'm going to say that again, even in a TPA environment, to double check the material and equipment prices with local resources in your market. That's fancy words for saying, hey, if they say drywall's 90 cents a square foot and Xactimate, go double check it against Home Depot. Sometimes things change. And so that price should be the same, if not greater, than what the price is for you to buy it off the shelf. If it's not, then there's an opportunity to make that change. You copy and paste the hyperlink as the F9 note on that line item. And we're seeing restorers, even in the TPA environment, getting those actions approved almost unilaterally, because it's a one-to-one, right? Like you're having a conversation with a real human. You're like, look, I can't even buy the drywall for that. Here's what it costs in my market. That works. The conversation around labor is a little bit more nuanced. And the way that Xactimate breaks this down is wages, burdens, and overhead. And so I don't want to get into the weeds on burdens and overhead because we'll be here for another 3 hours if you let me keep talking. I would encourage restorers to use the industry trend reports published in Exact Analysis to look at that base wage. That base wage is predicated based off of an individual with at least 8 years of experience. Why 8 years of experience? Because that's how they set the production rates. They will say a cleaning and remediation technician with at least 8 years of experience can remove 100 square feet of flooring in an hour. And so anybody that has less years of experience probably doesn't perform at that production rate. If that base wage in your market is not reflective of what you're paying a technician with at least 8 years of experience, then there's opportunity to substantively customize your labor pricing in your market. I should probably stop there, right? Because I can keep going.
No, I understand. We have an hour for this webinar. It could go all day. And we've seen that at our RA show. These topics are developed, but good thoughts, Anthony. We appreciate that. Ben, what would you say to this? Good thoughts to follow.
Yeah, I agree with Anthony. Is just staying on top of, those costs, whether they be material or labor. It can't happen real time, through the companies that we're working through on the pricing, but they can make the changes, but they just need the information. So if it's, if the labor is off or wrong and you can't get the work done for that, or if the material, the greatest example I remember is what lumber did, when we got hit with the pandemic and COVID. And I mean, it was literally doubling and tripling, on a weekly basis. And it was going so fast, couldn't keep up, and we were having to provide that information. So, smaller organizations, and that was me years ago, that were there, that didn't have the manpower to be able to. I think it's still important to designate somebody to capture, when you see something off with the pricing. You got all the tools that you need to understand, what the material and labor is for the line items. But if you see something that's off, being able to do that, and Verisk Exactware provides a pricing certification platform, and if you participate in that, you get a you've got a direct liaison with their pricing department, and it's just taking the time to get it down, document it, and share that information. And obviously, the larger companies, we have a specific person in our organization that does nothing but work with our different locations on the different pricing issues, and is sharing that with all the pricing platforms to be able to make. And when we do that, we see the changes, maybe next month or the next month, whatever it is. Once they're verified, we see those changes. So allow organizations like ISSA and RIA, but become members and allow us to help you as organizations and associations make these positive changes from an industry standpoint. So I encourage you to take those certification programs and educate yourself, or get somebody in your organization to educate yourself on what that is, and then designate that person to make sure they're given the feedback that's necessary to make the changes.
So the old cliche that it takes a village applies here especially, doesn't it? If everyone were to do what you both talked about, put that information in there, the hyperlinks to pricing, it would make a difference.
Yeah.
Right. All right, Nate, final word.
I think my answer is probably just going to be the boring one, but it's good documentation, right? Like if we just go back to the roots of everything, learning to document. Like I said, we do write estimates for a lot of our people, and sadly, most of them are not documented very well, and you're just going to get more kickback. So I think the other thing that I would suggest is if you're going to write estimates, become a master of writing estimates, right? A lot of people get into the industry and they just throw whatever they can onto something to hope that it will stick. But if you start to learn how insurance companies work, if you start to understand how the carrier works, if you start to learn what they do and don't allow, you're going to find that your estimates, a lot more of them are going to get approved if you can learn to write according to their style. And I know that sounds crazy, but we have a prior adjuster who does write for us, but he's also been a general manager of 4 different companies. He knows what each carrier likes to see and what they don't like to see. And so I would say, for those who are listening, if you have the time or the resources, truly invest in a good estimator who understands both sides of it, because I think you'll find more will get approved if you can learn to put it in a format that the carrier that they want to see.
That's good advice. Thank you, Nate. This next topic
Jeff, can I make a comment to Nate's there?
Mm-hmm.
And this is, some people are going to take this as a negative comment. Please don't. But be a master in estimating, and I talked about that earlier. People that have been doing this forever. Mark my words here. We're in 2024, and look ahead a couple of years. It's already happening in the insurance and the automobile side of the industry. But technology is going to be able to, and I'm already familiar with some technology that's able to do the scans and able to do pricing. And those people, if they're willing, those masters of estimating are going to be necessary, because they're still going to have to be reviewed and verified, the scope of work and the pricing and the documentation of what it is. But technology is just around the corner, and the property side of the insurance restoration industry is lagging behind when it comes to a lot of other industries with that technology. But I promise you were already seeing all the 360 scan availability, and it won't be long before those scans will be able to pick out and price the damages. But you're going to have those estimators be able to review and verify that scope of work, or it's going to be a lot of back and forth, which is what carriers and TPAs are trying to eliminate. So we need to make sure that we're training and doing the right things, because this pricing justification verification that we're talking about, that's going to be more of what we're going to expect, or what we're going to need from the people in the industry, to make sure that we're moving the industry forward and people are able to be profitable in the business.
Thank you, Ben. Good addition. This next point, we've talked about this already, so I don't know if we need to spend much time on it, because you all mentioned the tools and the documentation issues. Anything that we haven't covered you'd like to add at this point? Ben, anything from you?
I think we've covered it,
Okay.
you know, pretty well with, you know, what I just brought up, you know, on what we're able to do with the technology, the scans, what's in your phone. And it's really people thinking differently, people that have been in the industry as long as we have, to be able to understand and just slow down long enough. And I mentioned the lumber price, and Anthony mentioned, you know, Home Depot. I mean, it's literally as easy as scanning, taking a picture of, you know, the barcode and the price tag of, you know, that lumber or that drywall or whatever that is, and sharing that with the pricing liaison, with the pricing, you know, companies to let them, hey, this is an actual price, like real time right now. This is what we're having to pay for this, and our estimate says, you know, it is not even, don't even have this much in the estimate, you know, for the material there. So getting in a mentality that we have the tools in front of us if we will just utilize them to our advantage.
Yeah, maybe sometimes they sit there and they're not used as they should be. Nate, anything to add to this as well?
Yeah, just real quick, actually, we talked about all the technology. One of the things that I do see, if I could just give a suggestion, is, you know, 15 years ago, it was pen and paper and filling out scope sheets, and you couldn't get technicians to do that because we don't, you know, that's just always a burden. Now I see everybody has the technology, but in many cases, technicians are only still filling out half or doing half of what the technology really allows. So if you're going to invest in the technology, I'm also going to suggest invest in the time to get trained to use the technology for what it is, right? Like I have clients who use Encircle or Clean Claims, which are great, you know, documentation software, but the techs are still using it to take photos, and that's about it, right? I'm like, guys, this is more than just taking photos. And so I would say the technology is awesome, but if you're not utilizing it for what it was designed for, you're just spending a lot of money and not getting a good result. So train your people how to use the technology.
Yeah, they're going to default back to what they're comfortable with.
That's exactly right.
Anthony, before we move on, anything that we missed here?
Can I spend 2 minutes to show how people can access the industry trend reports? I'm just looking at the chat and there's some folks commenting, and I'm like, if we spend 2 minutes here, I think we answer a lot of questions on the labor side.
Yeah, I saw that too. Go ahead.
So www.exactanalysis.com. If you log in here, if you've never logged in, it's the same credentials as your Xactimate login. So whatever your Xactimate username and password is, it's the exact same credentials. You might have to link them the first time you log in, but nobody usually gets stuck there. If you go to reports, industry trend reports, it'll take you to this screen with this giant list of data and information. I want you to ignore all of it for right now. You're going to select what market you're in. And so for me, I'm in Hawaii, Wailuku. That'll take me to this price list. Then I'm going to select retail labor. Don't pay attention to anything else. This is a giant rabbit hole. You'll get sucked in. Just go to retail labor. And then pick whatever trade you have questions about. So we'll go cleaning and remediation technician. If you scroll up here, they give you 3 different views on the data. You're going to want to select retail labor breakdown because this is the graph that's going to give you wages, burdens, and overhead. And so the advice that I give everybody is if the wages are not reflective of an individual with at least 8 years of experience performing that work, then the price may not be right in your market and you have an opportunity to make some changes and increase those prices. The other thing I would tell folks to take a look at is you can change this time horizon from 1 year to 5 years. If you're looking at your market and you're not seeing overall increases over a 5-year time horizon, then nobody's providing pricing feedback, and that's the reason why it's not changing. Start providing some pricing feedback and it will change. The folks at Xactimate have articulated to us at the RIA level, look, we need more data. We need more pricing feedback. They actually want you to raise your hand and say it's wrong. So this is your opportunity to manifest destiny and actually start to take control of pricing in your market.
Well, that was pretty cool. Appreciate that. And everyone who just watched that and they're going, what do I do? You'll get a recording of this webinar and you can watch it again. So, and I'm sure Anthony wouldn't mind it if you reach out to him for help as well. All right, very good. Our next point is, I just want people to think about this as we go through the rest of our webinar. We're going to move a little quickly now because we want to get to our Q&A. We have a few questions that have come in. But think about the last 5 jobs your company completed. What are some of the issues or challenges that come to mind? And you can save those thoughts if you want for the Q&A. Once we start that, put those questions into the chat. Our panelists will watch for those as well. But give that some thought. What keeps you up at night? Maybe in the past week or so, the last few jobs you've had that were issues that you would like to discuss. So we'll leave it at that. And love to hear a brief thought from all 3 of you on what you see now with companies that are succeeding. Maybe they're your clients, or maybe, Ben, it's things your company's doing. But let's start with you, Nate, on this. You know, you have a lot of clients you're talking to every day. What are they doing to succeed?
I guess if we're going back to, is this pricing or is this just in general in the industry?
Pick a couple of things that just stand out. That's what I'm looking for here.
I still go back to, and I can't remember if it's Ben or Anthony who brought this up, but I am very, very much a people person. And it blows my mind how many people don't want to pick up a phone to call an adjuster. How many people maybe don't want to meet an adjuster out on a job. It's almost like they're afraid or they think it's going to be combative, but there is still a lot of face-to-face business that happens in this industry. And if you look at Blue Sky, if you look at ATI, if you look at Belfour, right, there's a reason why they still have sales reps. There's a reason why they have guys that fly out to other states to go meet people at these large losses. So I think if we're going to talk about success stories, I tell everybody, don't always hide behind the computer screen. Sometimes that's your worst enemy, right? Don't be afraid to pick up the phone when you find out who an adjuster is and just say, hey, this is so-and-so. I just want to give you a quick phone call. I'm going to be working on this claim. I'd love to meet you, right? Like, I am more of a create as many friends as you possibly can. The whole email thing, just, I think it allows for a lot of misinformation. And I understand people are probably listening going, Nate, I don't have time. I don't want to do that. But it's amazing how much more stuff can get done if there is some type of relationship. Even though we're going to a digital world, I think there is still a lot of that personal one-on-one. So if I were to talk about success stories, it's people who still try to maintain some type of relationship when at all possible. And I understand in some cases it's disappearing, right? But there's still a lot of big business that goes on because of personal relationships. And I think a lot of people miss out on that because they're not willing to go down that path.
I like that. I know Ben did mention that himself about he's a people person, likes to talk to people. I'll tell everyone here on this webinar, I'll testify to this. The quickest way to get Nate to call you is send him an email or a text. And I like that. I know. And I do answer my phone as well. I agree with you, Nate. There's some good logic there with talking to people and communicating. That's important. Yeah. Ben, anything to add to this? I know he took your thunder with the people person thing.
Yeah, I agree with Nate. I was just on the phone with our VP of large loss earlier today, and he's on a fire job. He had to meet the structural adjuster this morning, and he's meeting the contents textiles adjuster this afternoon. And the reality is, anytime we have the opportunity to do that with a carrier representative, we're able to work out the majority of what would be issues on the front end because we can figure out exactly what they're looking for and exactly what they want. And it gives us that opportunity to create that relationship that Nate was talking about there. And then we know moving forward, in the event that they can't get to the next one or whatever it is that that they're on another loss, we know what they're looking for, and we can communicate and make sure that we're getting them the images or the scans or the readings, whatever they need to be successful. Our job is to make their life easier and to be able to get this pushed through. So when we have that opportunity, to go out and have the face-to-face conversation. It does take a little more time on the front end, but it seems to eliminate, a lot of time on the back and forth on the back end, because I'm not a keyboard warrior, and I don't like those who are, and I'm one to pick up. I've got kind of a 3 email rule. If we get the 3 emails back and forth, I'm picking up the phone, because I don't have time to go back and forth. So from a success story, being able to get to a place where you designate somebody in your organization to focus on capturing the pricing deficiencies that you see and reporting them. Anthony just showed us, the tool to be able to do that, but being able to capture that and to share it, because the more of us that do that, the bigger the change that we're going to be able to make, and the faster change we're going to be able to make with the pricing inefficiencies, that we have in place.
Thank you, Ben. I like that. 3 emails and you're out. Phone calls coming. So Anthony, after this slide, we're going to go to our Q&A, but Anthony, what would you add to this? What do you see with companies that stands out to you as to a important part of what they do to be successful?
I would encourage all restorers to engineer process-based solutions to the pain that they're experiencing in their business. Far too often, restorers tend to engineer people-based solutions where they're saying it's taking too long for me to get my estimates out the door. I'm going to hire another estimator. I think that if you have the right process to guide the individuals in your business, it makes everything run so much smoother. And they do not have to be complex. Like all of our pivot clients that I work with directly, start to moan and groan when I mention creating checklists. But I think checklists are a great utility, right? Like, how do you make sure you have everything on the truck that you need to produce a mold job? You have a checklist. Somebody reviews the checklist and goes, yep, have all that stuff. And then you save a trip, right? Totally worth the extra 30 seconds to review a checklist and make sure that you have everything there. Same with estimating. You could create checklists for almost every function within a business. High utility, super easy to create, and it really doesn't distract anybody.
Very good. Love this information. So Martha, let's go ahead and take down there's our Q&A prompt. Let's get into our Q&A, and we'll invite Elizabeth on screen to do this with us. We have several questions that came in during the webinar, and let's get into those as well. But we do have, I tell you what, Elizabeth, welcome.
Hello.
Brand new to Cleanfax. Been here. How long you been here?
I think we're looking at a month and a half.
Yeah, so month and a half.
Busy, very, very busy month and a half. Yeah.
Yep, and here we are putting her on screen. So very good. Why don't you start us off with the first question that you sent to me in an email?
Okay, let me find that one then, Jeff. Okay, it said, I understand price matching through hyperlinks, but how would we justify a greater base wage based on technicians' pay?
So that's one that caught our eye in the chat. So how would we address that?
I mean, I'm gonna jump on that one.
Okay.
It's a grenade in warfare, man. So there is, if you read through the Xactimate documentation, they actually, like all the white papers, it is very clear how they recommend and how they assemble their own pricing. So it could be as simple as knowing what the wages are that you pay, knowing what the burdens are. So your taxes, your insurances, your employee benefits, what that burden rate is, and then knowing what your overhead is in order to assemble that. I did write an article on this that I'll go ahead and share in the chat as well. But I feel like the greater challenge is people make this too complicated, right? Like if you're invoicing at a specific hourly rate and you're not achieving your profit margins, then it is one of two things. Either the price is wrong or you're not being efficient with producing the product. It's one of those two things. And so what I always advise folks is try and make sure that you've eliminated inefficiency in the field before you start going and asking everybody else to pay you more money, because that will make you more confident in communicating that you need to get paid more.
Good information. Anything to add to that, Ben or
Jeff,
Nate?
I'm going to jump on something Anthony said earlier, and when he showed the graphic, it's important to remember these wages are for a seasoned technician or team member, somebody that's been in the business for 8 years, not somebody that's just coming into the industry. And I'll relate it locally here to the fast food industry, because sometimes we're competing against that industry for some of the same talent because of the pay scale that they have bumped up to. And again, I mean, they're paying almost $20 an hour for somebody to come in new. And so, we're competing against that same kind of target. So when Anthony showed the example, I think the labor price was $29, $30, and that's for an 8-year, seasoned, technician, veteran there. So if you have to be careful, because a lot of people are assuming that's they're just looking at those dollars and saying, okay, is this in line with what I'm paying somebody to come in and start, as a technician? And if they're not careful, we're not going to get the pricing information we need back. So think about somebody that's been in the industry for a number of years, and that's the number that we're really looking for to share with these pricing models.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like pricing with material is definitely straightforward compared to wages and labor. Yeah. Nate, anything to add to this one before we do our next question?
No, I think we're good on that.
Okay. I'll ask the next one, and then Elizabeth will take a couple. But this one might be more for you, Ben, with the RA perspective. I've heard talk about this, and this question's about government regulations or setting standards on restoration. Do you think that'd be good, bad, ugly, or is there a viewpoint?
I was hoping we wouldn't go political on this.
A little bit political.
I think it can be both. But at the end of the day, I think, we're in an industry that probably is at a place where it needs some additional regulating because of the open door policy that it's had for so long. And so the RIA is working, now with our AGA and, creating and, to have a representative and, in the future, a lobbyist that will be able to represent us as an industry, in those specific manners that we'll be able to make some of those, progressions and move the industry forward. Because I do think, there's lots of examples of industries that are regulated much more so than the restoration industry and, the work that we're doing. So I do think we're going to see that as we move forward. I do think it's important for the contractors specifically to have a voice, and that's where the RIA and our AGA comes into play. And we're going to need a bit more contractors. So if you're not RIA members, I would encourage you to join and jump on board with us, because we're going to need your help and your influence to be able to hire the right people, to have the right conversations, to move the industry forward with these, the regulations that we're talking about, governance.
Yeah. And Patrick Thompson just said, "Why not go union then?" I don't think that's what you meant, but
no, that's not what I meant at all. That's not what I meant at all. No.
Okay. Good conversation though. That's what we're having here. Nate, anything to add to that?
No, I think these guys, they're the experts on that side of it. So I'm in agreement with them.
All right. And Anthony?
Pay attention to what's happening in your local market. Here locally, we just had a very massive and devastating wildfire, and that has a negative impact on all the carriers and their ability to perform what they need to do in the state of Hawaii. And we're seeing all sorts of challenges around that. So, institutions like the RIA are great at finding what's happening on a grander scale and attempting to articulate and resolve those problems, but don't ever underestimate the power of providing your testimony to local and state government. I've seen that have a lot of impact here locally, and I would encourage everybody to monitor legislation that's happening in their own markets and voice where they feel like things are going off track. You'd be surprised at the reception you'd get.
All right, very good. Well, we'll turn it over to you, Elizabeth. You have a couple of questions, I think, that came in.
Yes, I believe this one's for Nate here. How important is a 360 virtual tour when writing an estimate? And then a follow-up to that is, do you think insurance carriers will make it a requirement in the near future to have 360 virtual tours?
Yeah, so yes, that is my question. We are requiring it on all estimates now. I think DocuSketch requires it obviously on all of theirs. The 360 is, you just need to understand the power of what a 360 does for the carrier as well as for your company. So if it's for your own company, number one, think about how many times your guys go and take pictures and don't take pictures of certain areas simply because they forget or they're lazy or they just aren't thinking about it. The 360 is going to eliminate a lot of the stupid factor because it encompasses everything. So from an owner's perspective, it's probably one of the easiest tools that you can implement, in my opinion. It is going to allow the technicians to capture everything that they should be capturing on a job, hopefully. From a carrier's perspective, I don't even know. I mean, I don't want to look at 500 photos. I don't want to look at 800 photos. And I definitely don't want to look at 1,000 photos. So if I can look at a 360 and be able to scan through something in 1 to 2 minutes, 5 minutes, I'd much rather do that than have to click through all the photos to see stuff. Don't get me wrong, photos still have their purpose. So I'm not saying that they don't. But I would say in the near future, I would not be surprised at a TPA level. That's where I think you might see it first, if it doesn't just become a standard that you're going to have a 360. So that's a prediction. I'm not in cahoots with anybody to say I know for a fact that's going to happen, but just if you look at the rate at which technology has gone, I don't see any reason why insurance would not start requiring the 360. Given our current state of affairs and technology and software, to me, it should just be a no-brainer that you do something like that. So yeah, that's my take. I think 360 is going to become very, very important and become required here in the next couple of years.
Ben or Anthony, do either one of you have anything to add to that?
I do. So real quick, like I rattled with this with our technicians over and over and over again. 6 photos per room. What 6 photos? Put your butt in the 4 corners of the room and take the widest shot possible. That's 4. And then give me 2 of whatever you think's important. Doesn't have to be more complex than that, right? Like if we just keep it simple, we get good data. I don't know. Sorry, I got a little soapboxy there, but I get it. I get opinionated when people start talking about photos because I'm like, Nate, I don't want to paw through 500 photos. That doesn't help me. Give me what's important, and that's it.
Yeah.
Well, this next question then, I think we'll start with Ben. How can we, each restoration company listening in, help the restoration industry continue with the positive momentum we're experiencing right now after the RIA convention? And then what are a couple specific things that we can do today?
Thank you. Yeah, we are coming off a lot of momentum from the RIA convention. It was a sold out show. The expo was sold out. Some of the breakouts, even the paid ones were sold out. And it just felt like for me, being in the industry for 30 years, we're at a place where we're actually have momentum and things are changing and things are happening and people are excited about it. And it hadn't been that way for many years. And so I think a couple of things that we can do as individuals and as contractors specifically is if you're not a member of the association, please consider go to the website restorationindustry.org and join the RIA, because the more voices we have to be able to go back to the industry, the more the bigger the voice we're going to have to the carriers, to all of the pricing, companies, the TPAs, everybody, the bigger voice that we're going to have. So the relationship capital that comes with that, I think, is invaluable. So please consider, helping us help you in moving the industry forward by doing so. And with that, there's a cost of doing business survey that's out. I would encourage all of you to take a look at that. That's running through the RIA, and Know-How is putting that survey on, first of its kind through the industry. If you, like myself and these other guys that have been in the industry a long time, we've never really had solid documentation on, you know, exactly what gross profit margins or net profit margins, or, you know, exactly what kind of O&P, you know, you are running and overhead expenses. I mean, and we need this information for our industry to be able to make good decisions in our workplaces, to be able to move through. So I would encourage you to get signed up for that cost of doing business. I know there's already, I think, 100 and maybe 120 plus companies that have signed up and are taking that survey. It closes at the end of the month. So I think May 31st is when that survey closes, and we'll get all that information back. If you take the survey, you'll get all the information back. I told you know, everybody from the town hall at the RIA and on a webinar last week, I encourage you, it's 1 hour. Give yourself 1 hour. It is some work. You are going to have somebody, yourself or somebody in your accounting team, you know, help provide that information. But I'm telling you, from an industry standpoint, it's going to help us understand where we stand, and for the first time ever have a foundation to build off of. I think this is the first tool that's going to be able to do that. So please consider that cost of doing business survey. You can go find that on the RIA website as well. But those are two specific things I think that can help move the industry forward.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised how busy the show was, Ben. I remember I was at the registration area, and there were some who wanted to walk the show floor. Usually you can go to a trade show and pay like $20 and get in. They said no. It was sold out. I saw it happen. So congratulations on a good show.
First time I've ever seen that happen, and it was a good feeling.
I thought they were kidding. I'm like, really? No, we're sold out. They were sold out. So to that point, anything to add, Anthony or Nate?
No, I
Okay.
think that was great.
I would just double down on the cost of doing business survey. If you haven't signed up, please sign up, participate. And it was actually Ben who said this. The data for you as a restorer will have more impact if you can articulate that it is inclusive of your data, right? Like, to go show somebody, here's what's happening in the industry, and it includes my organization, gives your organization more value in that conversation than if you choose not to participate and share that data. So think about that when you're trying to justify the time and energy and effort in your mind. I think it's worth it for every single person who's a restorer to participate.
Appreciate that, Anthony. Well, we want to respect everyone's time. We are at an hour, so we thank everyone for being here. Anthony, Ben, Nathan, for being expert panelists. We appreciate what you do for the industry here and at other times as well. And Elizabeth, thank you for watching the chat and getting some of those questions in line for us. Appreciate that. But everyone have a good day, and we'll see you on the next webinar.